Alrighty, hey everyone. Thanks
Hey,
for tuning in. We're here with Mitch. We're going to be doing some calculation training today. Mitch, how have you been doing lately?
I've been good. Finally got some good sleep last night after our talk. I hadn't been getting good sleep in the last few days, and
Hmm.
the baby slept really well, and so I had a very productive morning today, and um, got to study some chess in the morning. Got to exercise and feel like a productive human being again. So
Nice. Yeah, it feels good to exercise.
yeah.
Catch people up because people probably aren't aware of where you're at. You have some tournaments coming up, and how are you kind of generally training these days?
Yeah, so I'm hoping to play in some tournaments in February. Tentatively playing three all in the same weekend. As we
Hmm.
were just talking about, there's like one day events on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday of President's Day weekend. They're all like USCF dual rated, so it's like fast classical. I would call it slow rapid, but like thirty minutes with delay five or whatever. So
Yeah,
uh,
G45. Yeah, it
yeah,
feels super fast OTB. Feels like you have really little time.
yeah,
But that sounds like good practice.
yeah. And the first of them is actually like a class tournament, so I'll be playing people around my USCF rating. So um, that'll be interesting because I feel like my USCF rating is probably pretty outdated since it's from 3 years ago. So hopefully I can um, go 3-0 against people my rating because otherwise I haven't really grown enough to say I want to reach the goals that I want to reach. So that'll be a good warm up, and then the other ones are open. So should be a fun time.
Yeah. Well, OTB is a completely different animal, and I feel like the online experience it definitely translates because we see all
Hmm.
these kids like improving a lot, and they're playing like a bunch online. But yeah, you still need that OTB experience
Yeah,
because there's so many factors that just kind of like aren't there until you're. Yeah, it's just different. Like playing on a physical board, like a physical opponent in front of you, kind of
hmm,
looking at you. You have to be aware of like their body language and their presence, and this can affect how you're
yeah,
thinking about the game. None of that stuff uh, is relevant, online, and so we're like not used to it
hmm,
when we like get back to OTB. And of course, it's yeah generally a longer time control than we're used to online. So yeah, and how are you training these days? What have you been working on lately?
yeah. So I just recently started looking at excelling at chess calculation by Augard.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm like Kindle says I'm 13% of the way through
Great
it, but
book. I have it here.
yeah,
I'll show people.
yeah, I have it in the Kindle version, which a few places the Kindle version's a little weird. Like it'll give the solution before the diagram, sometimes in the diagram before the solution, because it's like weirdly formatted. But I try. I have two pieces of paper now that I try to cover up any moves whenever I see anything other than a diagram. So I've been trying that, and yeah, I think he gives a lot of really good pros, and a lot of good tips. As we were saying, like some of the stuff is extremely deep and far beyond my capabilities. But I think for the most part, I come up with the correct candidate moves to look at, and one or two moves past that, I'm usually good. But then sometimes I'll miss an opponent resource or something um, that he covers in better depth. But yeah, I think it's a good start for sure. And also just the general chessable grind. Trying to slow down a little bit on that, but I did get maybe a little too into it a few days ago with making an opening file of 540 lines in the Semislav Botvinnik for white, and then I realized that I'll never need to remember 40 lines in the semi-slab. So
Yeah, yeah, probably not. I mean, I think if you're gonna like kind of focus on something and work on something, let's say somewhat tedious, like building out like an opening repertoire,
mhm.
I would say much better use of your time would be to just try to find like really instructive games and whatever opening you want to study, like Semislav, just try to
Yeah.
find some really instructive games or some instructive moments that you know are interesting you can learn from, and then you just like collect those, and eventually you'll have like 50 interesting Semislav games or 50 Sicilians or whatever,
Mhm.
and yeah, I think through osmosis, just like over time, just like seeing all these games and patterns over and over again, like that will probably be more helpful than just working on. Because when you're building like an opening repertoire, it's like, yeah, not really absorbing a lot of ideas. It's just kind of like analyzing the position, looking at the engine, making sure
Mhm.
the engine is not being too volatile, because then you have to like kind of let it run a little bit deeper. It's just like this
Yeah.
whole kind of specific thing. But yeah, as everyone knows, yeah, openings are definitely probably not your issue.
Yeah.
I think it's more just about calculation is one aspect of it, but I would say another one or another area that we could definitely work on in the future is just like positional play
Mhm.
and just kind of like finding a plan in a position that's maybe not too concrete. You have a lot of options. You just have to figure out how to improve your position, how to react to what the opponent is doing, which I think is a very kind of subtle and kind of tough part of chess. But okay, for
Yeah.
today, we're just going to be working on one of your skills, which is calculation. So I have some problems for you. We've prepared. You're ready to set them up OTB
Yep.
and do some calculation. Now, I would love to be able to kind of hear what you're thinking as you're
Mhm.
solving. Do you think you're close enough to the mic where we could still hear
Yeah,
you?
I've got the mic on my headset. I
Oh,
would
cool.
think I just would have to mute you somehow, right?
You know what? I'll mute
Um,
myself in Zoom while you're solving,
okay,
so you
great.
don't have to
Then
worry about that. And then
perfect.
if I need to tell you something, I'll unmute.
Okay, great.
Sounds good. Okay, so yeah, I'll ask you as you're solving to just you don't have to say everything you're thinking, but maybe just kind of announce some of the moves you're looking at and where you're exploring, just so I kind of know where you're at and what you're analyzing.
Okay.
And yeah, I'll give you some nice mix of problems here. I don't think these will be too difficult for you. I think these are very, very doable, but I'm sure some of them will be tricky, so we'll see. Let me
Great.
get the
I'm sure
first
chat will
one
think they're very easy,
here.
but I don't have that open. But I'll watch the VOD and everyone will say how they got it so much faster than me. So it'll be great.
Don't worry about the chat. But chat, you guys can also obviously participate, and I would say maybe don't blurt out the answer if you're good, right, and you solve it really quickly. Maybe give others a try, because if you're good enough to solve it quickly, you're probably also good enough to know that you solved it right without having to confirm with me. Anyway, first problem here. This is white to play. If you want to set it up.
Okay. And will I have a time limit or um what's the plan
Um,
with that?
yeah, let's say about 3 to 5 minutes per problem. I might give you a little more.
Okay. And should I set a timer or will you just let me know when I'm getting close to being needing to make a move?
I'll just let you know.
Okay.
Also, kind of keep track of how close you are based on what you're saying. Okay, I'm gonna try to confirm that you have it right.
You need a bishop. Okay. Are you able to see the board well enough or should I angle the camera a bit more?
I think it's fine. Yeah, I think it looks right to me.
Okay.
All right, cool.
Great.
Okay, so I'm muted now in Zoom.
All right. So first thoughts are that I'm likely attempting to attack the king. I believe I'm the king's very weak. I'm up in exchange for um, two pawns. My knight's not involved yet, but my queen and my rook are already kind of attacking. So potential squares that are weak would be like trying to get my queen to maybe g5. Right now, if I go for something like queen f4, the king can escape through h7. Um,
Okay, I want to
let's
see
see.
him be a little bit more concrete here with the candidate moves.
Currently, just looking at knight avenues in or other ways in. H5 would be a mate, but the knight blocks off f5 for my rook to get in. But even if the knight takes, I recapture and I'm threatening mate on g6,
Good,
and
good spot.
it's on. I believe it's unstoppable without giving up the queen. So I get the queen and a knight for a rook and a pawn. So I think first move would be rook f5, threatening mate on h5. Is there anything other than knight takes, pawn takes, queen takes, where I'm already up and should be winning? If he tries to go king h7 instead, so rook f5, king h7. If yeah, rook h5 is still mate because the bishop's pinned to the king. So king h7 does not escape. And he doesn't have any good other checks. I mean, he could go knight e2, but then after that, I just escape with my king and I'm still threatening mate. So yeah, rook f5 is looking like my solution here. I'm gonna keep scanning and see if black has a different response.
So queen f4 check, guys. Black just goes king h7.
But rook
So there's
f5,
no
knight
follow
takes,
up
pawn
there.
takes, king h7.
Good. Important defense.
To try to escape the mate. And then just f6, once again renewing a mate threat on the by taking on g7, bishop's pinned, so I can't take. If the pawn takes, I take the queen.
Good, Neil. Good. Rook f5 is a very nice candidate move.
Yeah, there's no other way to defend after that. Yeah, so those are the two lines. Rook f5, knight captures, pawn takes, and then if king h7, then f6.
Okay, good. Looks good. Nice. I like how you got there in the end. Seemed like you started off with like a positional evaluation, which I think can be helpful, but it felt like you started to make progress once you started just concretely looking at moves, looking at ideas, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I normally just look at the concrete, and I've been trying to expand to some positional aspects in case the situation needs it, but I don't think it's always helpful. Maybe it's just helpful in some cases.
Yeah, I was thinking about it. It's not right, it's not helpful sometimes in terms of like speed, but it can be useful to kind of start with that. And if it's a little bit clunky or mechanical at first, that's okay because eventually it'll kind of just become second nature. Like
Yeah,
you
I would
just notice weaknesses and things like that. Yeah.
I watched a few Agard videos yesterday, and he kind of did that, but they were much more difficult problems than that was, where there was some positional aspects and some concrete aspects to it.
Right.
But he always started every position looking at weak squares, worst place piece, and ideas, and then got into the concrete from there. So
Yeah. He
something I
likes
started
this
picking up yesterday.
he likes this he has this three questions method, which
Yeah,
is very useful for like positional play, but even if there's concrete tactics involved, it also is very helpful. Yeah, especially to just consider like what does the opponent want to do next. Super,
yeah,
super important question. So well done. You spotted Rook F5. You didn't stop too early because you noticed that knight takes EF5 renews a mate threat, and so the line should be continued further.
mhm.
You then did eventually see King H7 as the key defense, which is very important. And then you looked hard enough to see F6, without which it doesn't really work. White is
Mhm.
just giving the exchange back. And this is, of course, the key move of the problem. Without this one, then, yeah, it's not really a complete solution. And the white is winning because black has no defense to mate without giving some material. So very good. Of course, in a game, it's easy to miss f6 if we're not sorry focused at this moment.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's very important to be able to kind of like tune your search, like when you're calculating, and if you feel like you're kind of close in a position to really try to push and look for these moves that very hard to see in your visualization if you're not like
hmm,
really doing a robust candidates check there. Okay,
yeah.
let's jump to the next one.
Okay. Will it show up in the same board, or do I need a new link?
Oh no, yeah, I'll just load it in a
Okay.
sec. Okay, white to play.
Okay. Yeah, and based on kind of what you said with that last thing, is that I think that usually my visualization is pretty strong, but sometimes like pins are a little harder to see from afar, than other concepts. But
Oh yeah,
uh,
yeah, that's why I like that one because that move f6, the brain kind of feels like it feels it's impossible at first because black has so many pieces on the dark squares there
mhm.
that yeah, you can only consider it if you're really looking for the forcing moves and if you have crisp visualization of the position. Also very, very important.
Okay, I
Okay, that
think I have it
looks
set up.
yeah, that looks good. Alrighty then, I will mute.
All right. Okay, so again, looking like a very weak king. Initial position as the queens facing each other, which could be important. Um, Pieces look even. Yeah, it looks like even material. Um, Yeah, it's probably going to again be an attack on the king or taking advantage of the back rank in some way. While also noting that my back rank is very weak.
Thanks, Mr. for
Okay.
for the sub.
So initial thoughts are the king and the knight are lined up for, I think it's Arabic mate, Arabian mate. So the first thing that jumps out to me as a potential candidate would be rook takes g7,
Cool.
because if ignored, the rook will just go to h7 and it's mate. The bishop can't drop back to g8 because then the queen goes to takes on h5 and it's mate. Mate on the next move.
By the way, guys, it's helpful actually that you're letting me
or
know what
in a few
Canada moves you're
moves.
looking at
Let's see, it'd
because
be to fully
helps me
flesh
get
out the
an
line.
idea
Rook takes g7,
of the difficulty.
bishop g8, queen takes h5, or cleaner. No, cleaner would be rook takes g7, bishop g8, rook takes g8, rook takes, then queen takes h5, and that is mate. Or no, king to g7, and then after king to g7, queen to g6, king h8, then queen h7 mate. So that's the mate. If the bishop falls back, if king takes on g7, queen to g5 check. If the king goes back to h8, then it's just queen to h6 mate. If the king goes back to f8, then
Yeah, important moment here.
then might I was looking at knight h7, but then king e8, and he's looking like he's escaping through like d7 and c8.
Yeah, so this is what I call resistance. It's like you have the king on f8, so he's looking at rook g7, king takes, queen g5 check, king f8, knight h7 check, because that's kind of, okay, makes sense, like opening up the queen, king goes to e8, and then if knight f6 check, king goes back to f8, if rook e1, king d7, queen e7, king c8, king is running away. So this is very tough to overcome in your calculation. Either you try to make it work anyway, or you look for an improvement.
And also, if the queen comes to h6, comes to e7.
Yeah. So now he's calculating queen h6 check in that position, but then king e7, and king is running away.
Okay, so if queen h6, king e7, rook e1, feels like he's escaping, but king to d6. The knight can get a reveal check, but the question is, is good?
Yeah, I mean, the line he's looking at is very natural. Because he wants queen h6 check, king
feels like he's
e7, rook
escaping
e1,
from
king
here.
d6, then he has a discovered attack. Issue is what to do with it.
So let's go back and see if I missed something earlier.
Going back is wise.
So initial thought was rook takes g7, king takes g7. Queen to g5, king to f8, and I don't think queen h6 was finding it.
So this is the moment to pause and look for something else. Thanks, Dasik. Appreciate it. That's funny, Dirk. Yeah. Mitch right now is calculating rook takes g7, king takes g7.
Yeah, now I'm just searching for initial
Queen g5 check, king f8.
new candidate moves in case it's not rook takes g7, since I've gone down this rabbit hole and it looks like the king was escaping. But
Yeah, he's very close. I don't want to help him just yet because he was super close to finding it on his own. But the nice thing is, like, what other moves can white really look at here? Because queen on h4 is hanging, knight on f6 is hanging. There are potential tactics, on the d file. So white doesn't actually have a ton of candidate moves here other than rook takes.
I really want to make the rook takes g7 work.
Yeah, see, there it is.
It's hard for me to find another candidate move from the starting position because the knight's hanging to the
knight
queen
e4
right now.
doesn't lose material yet, but it also doesn't really threaten much. And for example, knight c3 I think is annoying reply. Yeah, I thought he would find rook e1 because he spent so much time in that position, but okay, it's not an obvious idea, right? So at least not for everyone. It is thematic. Someone like David, I think he finds that the solution very, very quickly here because he's seen these positions in combos many times. He knows about cutting off the king. It's no secret. Yeah, there's idea of resistance. Yeah, exactly. I feel like
okay. Rook takes
really
g7,
useful.
king takes g7, queen to g5 check, king to f8. If now rook to e1,
Hey, there we go.
cutting off the king.
Thanks. No rematch for the sub. 18 months. Nice.
Now the threat is queen h6 mate. So what does black have to stop that? Moving the bishop
Knight e4
makes it so
doesn't really
that
come with too many
queen
threats.
h6 is not mate.
So black can, I think,
So
play a couple moves like knight c3
can move.
Is very annoying.
It has to stay protecting g8, so it can't go to like e8 or something. Bishop could go to.
Well, it doesn't really save the knight for very long, right? Because knight e4, knight c3 is going to be a problem.
But I think that
everything's hanging in white's position.
You can't just take it with the rook because the back rank hangs. So um, probably
But
take it
queen
with
queen is still hanging on h4, Dirk.
pawn.
You gotta
There's not a.
keep the position
I mean, I'd probably
visualized.
just still go queen 6 first there. Because if the king goes to e7 and the rook takes, and then that is almost mate. The king would still have f7, and then yeah, meeting there. If the king were to go to f7 instead of to e7, um,
We kind of missed what he's
probably
looking at now.
pawn takes, and then if the king goes to e7 from there, queen to g7, and
Yeah, I
then
think
the
he's looking
king's
for
kind
moves
of
after rook e1.
starting to potentially get places. King to e6. Yeah, so instead of taking on e6 with the pawn with the king goes to f7, I think I go
Oh, bishop
um,
e6 he's looking at.
queen to g6 in that position.
So he's looking at rook e1,
Because
bishop
if
e6, queen
the
h6 check,
king goes to e7 there, then the rook takes with check. If the
king e7, rook takes
king goes
e6.
back to f8 from there, um,
Yeah.
then in that position, taking with the pawn, I'm threatening mate on f7. Um, and on g8 almost mate. So if like rook to a7, trying to defend the f7. Um, then I go queen g8. He has e7. It's getting to the point where I'm struggling to visualize that position, but if I were running low on the clock, I would lock in the rookie one, as that's that situation. Um, how am I doing on time? Do you want me to keep going or clear up my thoughts, or what would you say in this situation, Kostya?
I think that's good, Mitch. You feel good about the solution?
Yeah, I feel good about the starting move being rook takes g7. Um, and I feel like in the situation rook takes g7, king takes g7, queen g5, king f8, I think rook e1 just it feels like it's going to win. If I had like a ton of time on a clock, I would spend a lot longer, but I'm feeling like even if bishop e6 trying to block off that I still should have the mate, but I would need to find it over the board.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, I think you definitely did good enough here. So, right, other than rook takes g7, it's like not a whole lot you can even consider here. Not too many candidate moves. Yeah. So
Yeah.
takes queen g5 here, and yeah, I was hoping you would find rook e1 sooner.
Mm-hmm.
Because for a lot of players this can be kind of like an instinctual resource. Once you see like knight h7, king e8, the king is escaping, which I think you found pretty quickly, and then
Yeah.
this one, okay, looks very tempting because you get the king on d6, but unfortunately there's no clear knockout here.
Yeah.
And I think you're feeling like the moment of resistance more or less at the right time. You're like, king has a lot of squares now, and
Yeah.
this looks very, very loose. We sack the rook. So once you see these two lines, then I think for a lot of players, a lot of strong players, let's say rook e1 is their next move.
Yeah.
They might even come to it sooner just because they have this experience of like knowing how important it is to cut off the king. Or I think someone mentioned in chat, Agard calls this the kill zone, keeping the king in the kill zone, not letting it
Yeah.
escape. So once you do notice rook e1 and queen h6 is a huge threat, then yeah, that becomes well, very, very promising for white. So yeah, you mentioned this move, and I think you were fairly accurate here. You wanted queen h6 check. One thing I would say is like you shouldn't really be afraid of calculating quiet moves as well. Like
Hmm.
it's nice to be forcing, but for instance, if we just take a look at this move, like just immediately, like you have so many threats here that it feels like this should be good. And so we don't have to, let's say, only be looking at like the check. Sometimes you might even have just a simple solution as well. I think the key,
On here, if king e7 or what's going on here,
um,
then
yeah, I would think you have enough. I mean, you're only down the exchange, but there's lots of
yeah,
like
yeah. If I go queen g7 here, and then what king's only square is d6, then I could potentially get a check while or I can't check and also threaten the queen because it'll be protected by the rook if the king moves. But it's probably good enough to even push the pawn there. Um,
yeah. I mean, I think white has a lot of options. Even here, like you have all kinds of like discoveries. So yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned you saw enough that you would play it in a game, right?
yeah,
So
I
that's
felt good
important.
enough
Yeah.
after rookie one that I'd be willing to get to this position um, and play it from here.
Right. And then once you get here, then it's a lot easier to actually calculate it out.
Yeah,
So I guess there's something about maybe sensing when you might only have one way to win or maybe zero, and then you really have to kind of see it ahead of time versus when it, yeah, to me this feels like the position where maybe white has, there's knight h7 also like another check that you can throw in. It feels like white has a lot of ideas. Although once you see that you're even taking the bishop with check, then I think
yeah,
probably don't have to go too much further if you're struggling to like visualize it. Because I think you even got all the way here, and
yeah.
it felt like you were like unsure about this position.
Um, I was starting to struggle to visualize after rook a7. Um, and I was thinking rook a7 and then queen to g8 and king e7, and then I was kind of struggling with
Right, it
the
starts
board
yeah, it starts to
clarity.
get fuzzy again. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, right, but of course it's probably much easier once you get to this point to find the win. Generally speaking. So, any ideas?
well, I can just win a rook is one idea with queen to g8, king to e7, and then queen to g7. Or never mind, it does not win a rook. The queen's protecting the rook. Um, but then even there, when the king goes to d6, I can just push e7 and then be doing really well there.
Yeah, I think that pretty much wins for white. What if I asked you to try to find the mate here? Because it
Oh,
there's
just
like
e7
so
rook
many,
takes
right?
queen g8.
E7, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So okay, this was like the, I guess, little trick, you're missing in your visualization. But at this point, it's like move six, and so if you spend like another 3 5 minutes visualizing this moment, and then you finally find e7, or maybe you calculate this line out and you're like, okay, that should be winning, or like the queen g7 line. It might be like, yeah, time not exactly worth spending because
Hmm.
you're you're going deep in a position where you probably will have options along the way. And so
Yeah.
if you have options, then you might as well get to this position and then, you can calculate after bishop e6.
Yeah, and that's something that's really nice about the excelling at chess calculation is several times already in the like short amount that I've read, he's mentioned like it's not completely important to see all the way up to this position, but like to get a few moves in and feel comfortable and then get to that on the board and maybe recalculate.
Right.
And I think that's something that I struggled with in the past of either trying to find the whole thing or simplifying what I searched for and then assuming that I was correct at all times through that. So in my recent game with Dan that I sent you, I did a calculate. I calculated 6 moves or something, 5 or 6 moves, and 2 moves into it, I should have recalculated and seen that I had missed something from him,
Mm-hmm.
and it cost me the game.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I remember my note on that game was, right, you didn't really spend enough time for a position that appeared dangerous. Of
yeah,
course, it was objectively dangerous, but it also just appeared very dangerous. And so those are the type of positions where you do want to spend that extra time because you're not going to have many options possibly once you start going down
yeah,
the route. So yeah, there's something about like the intuition there about I guess I often hear it as like a sense of danger in some contexts, or
yeah,
just like a sense of like how sharp the position is and whether you're only going to have one move or maybe multiple moves.
yeah. I
That can
think that's
definitely affect
also
things.
something to work on at some point. I think one of my weaknesses is I can sense. So I'm pretty good at sensing danger for my opponent. So figuring out an attack, but sensing that I'm in danger is something I really struggle at. I overestimate my attacks and underestimate my opponent's attacks is kind of a
Yeah.
thing. So
Difficult. All right, let's do another one.
okay.
This is white to play.
I think Dalton came out with a course on Chessable recently that I might look into on like defending well.
Mm,
I don't know if that would fit
interesting.
that category of helping you sense opponent's threats. But
Oh, for sure, for sure. Yeah, defense is all about trying to understand the threats and yeah, figuring out what move you can play safely.
I think it just comes from too many games of I've played the white side of the Sicilian where I just ignore the fact that black is trying to get at me and I try to get at him and normally I'm a
Yeah.
little bit faster.
Right.
Black queen. Okay. I think I have it set up.
Okay, this one is quite complicated. Let's see. Yeah, it looks good.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, white to play.
Okay, great. Okay.
Alrighty, let me unmute it.
Initial assessment is materials even. both kings are kind of being threatened right now, but black only has one piece on my king. Potentially could get the knight in as well at some point. Like maybe um, my king actually feels pretty decent. Because even with like a rook sack on b3, I just take back with the rook and then it's fine. But anyway, my rook is hanging on b6. His rook's hanging on b5. My bishop's hanging on e3. Lots of hanging pieces. This was a taller Shirov game. um, yeah, so initial like thought is that something like queen h7, king f8, um, queen h8, bishop takes, rook takes, king to g7, bishop to d4 isn't working because one of the pawns just blocks, and then it all just doesn't work. Another initial thought is bishop takes c5, taking the knight and also defending the rook on b6. Maybe queen h7 first, king f8. Then when I take on c5, it's also with check. That leaves black with fewer options because he could have maybe had some in-between moves with queen takes e4 or something. So let's start there. Queen h7, king f8, bishop c5, rook c5. And then what's my idea? Yeah, I'm not seeing much from that position. Okay. I guess another thing that has to be considered is what if I take the rook? Rook takes b5. Queen takes e3. Queen to e2. No, because then queen to c1. Or if queen c1, I'd have to block with like queen d1 and then back to e3, and then that's not looking like anything. So on queen e3, king to d1, queen to f3. Can't block with the queen because then the rook's hanging. On king c1, Potentially, is there anything with the bishop sack on b2? I don't think so. The queen goes back to e3, then the king goes to b1, and then I don't know. Feels like I'm hiding, but also I feel like the pieces are all aimed at my king is one kind of scary thought there. I'm not seeing.
You need to
So, I
check
mean,
your
if he ever
visualization there,
goes
Mr.
something
Fur.
like queen to d4 from that position where my king's on b1, so trying to threaten mate on b2. I probably can just move the bishop. The rook protects it. If I move the bishop, then I can also come to a4 to join in. So let's say queen to d4 there. Yeah, it's looking potentially bad. So maybe go back to the first king move after queen takes e3, king at f1 maybe. Um, and then he has queen to c1 as well as queen to f3. On side checks from the queen, such as like c1 and d2 and whatnot, I think the goal is to get the king to like h3 and then block with the queen. So that way we're keeping the king close to guard the rook, and then eventually we should have a good fortress there. I don't think fortress is the right word, but good defensive coverage there. On f3, I think king can still come to g1, and then yeah, similar plan of we're going to bring the king to h3 and then go protect with the queen and rook, and then yeah, and then so we traded we got up the exchange. um Other thoughts we have to include: queen takes, so after rook takes, queen takes, king f1. What happens if the knight tries to get involved with like knight takes e4?
Good. So he's looking at rook takes b5. I think he's spending too much time on it, but it's okay. It's I think an instructive moment. So he's trying to make rook takes b5 work, but queen takes e3, king f1. Now he's looking at knight takes e4. And yeah, the problem is not necessarily that black has like some fancy checks and win the game. The problem is white is only up in exchange and the king is super weak on f1 and all the pawns are weak and the rook on b5 is out of the game. The bishop on b3 is not doing anything. And black's queen, knight, bishop are all super active. Black can play like rook d8 in any moment and get the rook in as well. So big problem there is the king safety. Yeah, V Prahara. I don't know for sure, but I would imagine that white does have the right to castle. Yeah, not in this position, of course, but I
The
think
knight's
you
on
meant
e4 and does have threats of like
in general.
knight to g3. So we have to be careful.
This is a tough one.
I'm not seeing like anything concrete from there. I don't know, maybe I have to put the rook
I
on
faced
d1 to
Queen
protect the
King
g3
checkmate
square.
3 times last week, and thanks to Kostya I checkmated them all.
Right, the king
No
over there again.
stalemate.
Thanks,
But
Ishigo.
just going
It's great
back,
to
just in
hear.
case. The rook takes b5, queen takes e3. I discarded queen e2 pretty early, but queen e2, queen c1, queen d1, queen e3, and then king f1 there maybe is the better. I don't know. I don't know why I would think that'd be better because it's harder to hide the king behind the queen that way. But I mean, the queen is controlling the other checking squares from the queen. No, I guess you can check on f4. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to discarding that and keeping king f1 as my main move. Yeah, so rook takes b5, queen takes c3, king f1, knight takes e4. Rook to g1. Is that getting mated? Because on knight to d2,
Knight d2 should work.
king to g2, queen to f3. I think I just mated myself, so that's not correct. So it can't be rook to g1.
Alrighty, Mitch, let's discuss.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a very tough one, but I think it's a great problem. So I just wanted you to spend some time on it. So yeah, it feels like you're basically not, you don't have a move to play, right? Like,
Yeah, I was struggling with the rook takes b5, but right as you chimed in, I thought maybe going back to the bishop takes c5, rook takes c5, and then oh, never mind. I was gonna say queen f2 there, but that just drops a rook. So okay, no, I don't have a good move here.
yeah.
That's
Well,
calculated.
that's okay. It's a very tough one. I think so. My feedback here is I think you did spend way too much time trying to make this work. I
Yeah.
think once you see queen e2 and you're looking at this and then this one, right? And then you're okay, you have like queen e2, we have at least a draw here for black. or you're
Yeah.
also considering like king f1, and then you're trying to make like king f1 work. I
Yeah.
think this is a question of evaluation, because if we look at the position, black is down the exchange, but everything else is kind of in black's favor, right? Like the king
Yeah.
safety, the pieces, even white's pawns are super weak. Like if black
Mhm.
takes both of these and goes into an endgame, it's like probably very good as well. So once you see knight takes c4, I think this is a good moment to stop and realize it's probably not working for white.
Yeah.
Now, of course, in the game situation, you still have to find the move. So maybe rook takes b5 is still the best thing you can come up with and just hope for the best, and so be it. But given that it's like a puzzle and there's probably some solution, then you can definitely, I think, cut it off a little bit sooner.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of what to actually do, I mean, the solution is very concrete here. I'll give you a hint. What do you think were the last two moves of this game? Because the position, I mean, it's like it's crazy, but there is kind of a logic to it.
The last two moves of the game,
Yeah.
like to
So
get to this position, or like the final two moves at the end of the game?
no, the previous two moves. So black's last move, and what was
Oh.
white's move before that?
Um. I'm assuming that white captured on b6 and then black captured on f3.
Okay, good, very good. So yeah, because otherwise this rook on b6, you know, was just like hanging there. So clearly this rook couldn't have been here for very long.
Yeah.
And you're saying black's queen captured on f3. Yeah, this had to have happened recently, right? Because otherwise, like this one would be
Yeah.
hanging and the rooks are hanging and so on. Where do you think black's queen came from?
I would guess f6.
F6, right? Like where else
Yeah.
could really be possible? Okay, so you have the right kind of thing. So queen was on f6, pawn was on f3. White's last move before that was rook takes b6, maybe rook to b6. So there the question is, why didn't black just take the rook back? What was wrong with that?
Then queen h7, king f8, and then bishop takes c5 check.
Right. So that was white's idea. Queen h7 check, king f8, bishop takes c5, and white's winning a piece.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's kind of your hint in this position. So instead of recapturing, black played queen takes f3, which looks like an excellent practical try, taking a pawn and creating a bunch of counterplay. And now there's still something connected to this idea of king on f8 being vulnerable to this bishop takes c5.
So yeah, one of my thoughts had been queen h7 and then king f8 and then bishop takes c5, but then the rook just takes, and that's not looking good anymore. But
So yeah, you have to consider queen h7 check, king f8, and here you have to look for candidate moves.
yeah, well, the very first thing I looked at had been queen h8, bishop takes, rook takes, king g7, and then bishop d4. But I just figured with like f6, then that no longer matters, and we're just losing. F6 or e5 is probably better than f6. E5 because f6 maybe there's at some point a check along the back rank. Not really. But either way, we cut off the bishop and it's rook on h8's hanging, and our king is still unsafe and whatnot, and we're down the queen. So queen h7, king f8, and then queen takes g7 also doesn't work with king. Queen takes g7, king takes bishop h6, and then king just hides on a light square, and then we're not doing anything. Yeah, I'm struggling to find candidate moves here that look any decent.
Yeah, I mean, not many options for white, right? Queen h7, king f8, and then bishop on e3 is still hanging with check. This is a huge threat. Rook possibly hanging on b6 and b5.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like trying to think of ways to like sack the rook on e6 or something to make even more damage to the king, but then the bishop just hangs on e3 with check. So I'm struggling to find like a non-check move that that would work. But I mean, I had already said bishop c5, rook c5, and I couldn't find anything from there.
Yeah. All right, that's fine. Sometimes, yeah, we just don't see it.
Yeah.
So
I'm not seeing it.
Queen h7, king f8. Key idea here is that we can hit black's queen with a move like rook h3.
Okay.
Because the point is we're defending the bishop with tempo, and this rook on b5 is still hanging.
Yeah.
So yeah, this one would have been good
H3,
to see
entirely.
Yeah, my feeling is maybe the visualization was off a bit, because it is a natural counter move. Like we're just hitting the queen and defending the bishop with tempo.
Yeah.
Okay, a few people suggested this in chat. It doesn't work. It doesn't actually work, but it is a very important candidate move. The problem is, so if black tries to give the queen this way, which is a very natural reaction, then there's bishop takes c5 at the end, and white is way ahead. But black can actually sack the queen here, which I think a lot of people missed. Not an easy resource, but once you see it, it kind of all works out. Then black gets a bunch of material for the queen, and very, very nice compensation with the dark squared bishop. Now white's queen is essentially useless here, and black is at least okay. So rook h3 doesn't actually lead to an advantage for white, but there is a second idea along similar lines. that does work. And the key was that we push the king over to f8 with this first move, queen h7 check.
I guess bishop c5, rook c5, and then rook to f1. And then, I mean, he's still trying to gobble up pawns, and I don't quite have the threat yet.
Yeah, okay, this is a tough one. No, I can tell it's tough. I mean, I don't think anyone in chat solved it until until just now, but Chess Gains got it. So queen h3. Queen h3 is the key. Because white is doing the same thing, defending the bishop with tempo.
And then, yeah.
After the forced queen trade, we leave black with this situation where the rook on b5 and knight on c5 are caught.
Good job, Max. Yeah. I just couldn't see those ideas at all.
No, that's okay. And part of this is I'm kind of like playtesting some of these exercises. I knew this would be a very, very tough one, but I still just wanted to give you and others a chance, because it's a 2-move solution essentially. It's queen h7 check, and queen h3. Problem is you have to kind of look a little bit. You have to overcome the resistance of like, oh, if we trade queens, there's nothing. Yeah, usually when we offer like a queen trade, it's like, well, black can take and then make any move, right? How could this possibly be like a winning tactic?
Yeah.
But very, very cool idea. I guess it just takes like some, I don't even know what to call it, like some patience to kind of even consider the move for long enough.
Yeah. I think part of what I struggled with was, like, I think I focused on the king way more than I focused on like defending my pieces or attacking the queen.
Oh, and all the stuff that's hanging. Yeah, because everything is very, very loose here. So yeah. Now in the game, this is a game played by a grandmaster, Alex Ivanov, who is always a very, very strong player and plays in a lot of like U.S. Opens actually. He had the advantage, right? Because if you think about it, the previous position was this one. His rook was probably on d6, something like this. So of course his calculations started here with this move rook b6, and he sees the idea that, all right, he wants to give this check. So this one is already kind of focused, like present in his mind, that this is a working tactic. So he knows kind of the power of this like construction. Of course, he probably calculated queen takes f3 as well, because it's a very forcing move and black gets a huge counterplay here. And how he came up with queen h7 back to queen h3, I mean, it's hard to explain exactly, but to me, it's clear that he had this idea in his mind already, and somehow he noticed that this is working long enough for black's pieces to start hanging at the end.
Yeah.
Very, very difficult in my view, but I think super instructive, because these are the moves that really evade, I think most players. Myself personally, I could see myself giving up on rook b6. I don't think I would have necessarily seen that solution. But okay, it's a much harder puzzle if it starts from here. Anyway, let's do one more if you have time.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, white to play. Yeah, that's a good point, Dan. There are also other tactics with like knight d3 check and the bishop on e3. Yeah, such a beautiful geometry in that puzzle.
Okay.
Yeah, looks good.
Yeah, I think I got it. All right.
All right, cool.
All right. So initial thoughts are around potentially mating the king here with maybe a sack on g6 at some point. So I guess first things to calculate is e takes f7. If bishop takes, then we're not getting that right away because if rook takes on g6, then there's always like bishop takes. So if we take the bishop instead, then the rook takes, and the rook takes, and the king takes, and now we've just lost a lot of material. So it's not looking like it quite works with what we want. Other thought is that e7 would trap the rook if the rook on e5 couldn't take it. Oh, and I have the bishop back here that I should have noticed. Yeah, so now that I've noticed my bishop on g2, first thought is bishop d5, because if the rook takes, then we just play e7 and now essentially winning the exchange. Though we have to potentially consider, yeah, so to finish that line off, bishop d5, rook takes. If e7, if rook to d2, then we play rook f to or 1 to f2, and then that way we're protecting the pawns and we're not losing the pawns there. And then we'll take on f8 and we're up the exchange and should be doing okay. It might still be a little tough to win, but it should be better at least. It's the exchange for a pawn, and at least our pawns are advanced, and therefore his king's could be pretty bad there. So if bishop d5, if he doesn't take, our threat is e takes f7, and then on bishop takes f7, bishop takes, rook takes, rook takes, am I counting correctly? Pawn takes, bishop takes, bishop takes, rook takes, rook takes. Yeah, and then we're good. And threatening mate on g7. So what else can he do?
So bishop c6, guys, I'm not sure I'm seeing the idea. Black will take. e takes f7 check. King goes to h8.
So I guess the other thing to consider is after bishop d5, rook to e2.
Thanks, Nose. Yeah, I think it was one of my best. It's hard to kind of judge directly after the game, but yeah, looking back on it, that was a really good game. I'm very happy with that one.
I think
We go rook takes f7, then black will
because
take.
if we protect with the rook, then he takes, and we take, and then he takes the e6 pawn, and then, or no, he can't take the e6 pawn because we actually take that with check, and then the king moves to h8, and then we win. So yeah, maybe in that position still. So bishop d5, rook e2, rook 1 to f2. Rook takes. And then we're still threatening e7 on the next move is the important part there. And he can't take the pawn because we win the game. So yeah, so I think rook e2 is met by rook 1 to f2. And then I'm not seeing any other ways that he can prevent e takes f7 there. Because of course rook takes e6, then our bishop takes on e6, and ta-da, we win. So yeah, I guess the main thing was just bishop d5, rook takes d5, and then e7, and then rook d2, rook 1 f2.
Okay, cool. Let's discuss. So
Okay.
yeah, bishop d5 is good. Very strong. And just threatening to take on
I'm
f7.
glad I didn't spend too long without realizing that I had bishop on g2, because I definitely overlooked that in the first part of the position.
Yeah. So now I think only key line, let's say rook takes here, e7. And yeah, you mentioned this one. You're gonna block with the rook.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it matters too much, but let's say this one. And then you get some position like this where you will be up the exchange and should be really good winning chances.
Yeah,
because black doesn't have any passed pawns. You have this h6 pawn, so you always have this kind of long-term idea of getting the rook to h8, and you have this clear weakness. You also have the queen side you can target. Should be winning position in by technical means. But I do want you to maybe pause here and look for other options. It's not really important that you had to see this, before playing bishop d5, because white is just having decisive advantage. But during the game, I wouldn't want you to just play rook f2 immediately. I would want you to at least consider other ideas too.
Okay. Well, the other idea would be moving the king to start. So king to h3, so there's not a potential bishop c6 check in some lines or something. So king h3, let's say rook takes c2. And then I guess rook takes g6, h takes g6, and h7, king takes, and then now we're taking the rook and queening.
Good. Rook takes g6. Yeah, exactly. So you can go, king g3, king h3 here, and it's actually a lot stronger. You just win the game immediately because black doesn't really have a defense to this one. And in fact, in the game, black tried rook e5, which I think was maybe a clever try. I think black might have. Also, black probably didn't want to trade off a pair of rooks anyway after rook d2 check. If they're minimum going to be down the exchange, then you'd rather keep the rook on. So black tried rook e5, and instead of just rushing e takes f8, as I think most people, they would just take the rook, okay, like my combination has worked, and now I'm up in the exchange. White instead looked for other options and probably even saw it ahead of time, and found this one, which is very beautiful. And I think this is an important point. So you, as far as I'm concerned, you saw the exercise just fine, but because your line was definitely winning. But very important to always kind of like pause, anyway, when you're kind of playing out the combination and looking for these alternative ideas. Because the only reason you wouldn't find this rook takes g6, given that you found it like pretty quickly when I put you on the spot, is because, if you already had the idea that you need to go rook f2 here, it's only because you already decided, like this would be your move. So it's like a psychological thing. It has nothing even to do with your visualization or candidates finding or anything like that. It's just purely psychological, always being willing to not make assumptions, basically, I think is what it comes down to. This type of thing is all about just making some kind of assumption about the position. I have to play this, or my opponent has to play this. And unless we're 100% accurate with that kind of statement, a lot of times it means you can miss an idea. Question from the chat. No, this was a real game. This was the game played between Short against Stephenson, 2002. So Nigel Short against Icelandic Grandmaster.
I actually thought, based on the position of the pawns, that it might have been composed, but it's interesting that it came from an actual game.
Yeah, real game. No, too many pawns for it to be a composition. Like these pawns on b4 and c4, they're not super. Because studies, every piece is like placed just so, where like the idea wouldn't work if it wasn't there. Like without this b2 pawn, white still wins in the same exact way. So this pawn would not, these pawns would not even be needed. But it is a study-like solution, which happen all the time in games. That's why I think studies are instructive and worth doing. This move, bishop d5, of course, very nice, just kind of freezing black and winning the game. Anyway, so
all three of my initial points came up in the end with because I mentioned a sacrifice on g6 in my first assessment, and then taking on f7, and then I found the bishop d5, and I also had mentioned the e7. So I thought that's funny that in the end the rook takes g6 became a part of it, because I don't think I would have found it as quickly if I hadn't thought of it at the very start of it.
That's right. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because you mentioned this rook takes g6, so it was clearly like kind of on your mind. Now, people always say like, oh, puzzles are much easier because there's a solution compared to like a game, but there's also a reverse thing in play where like during a game you're often like trying to make the same tactic work in like different positions, and so when it does finally come up and it finally works, it's not surprising that the player finds it, right? Because they've been trying to make it work the whole time. Whereas in a puzzle, you have to kind of figure out, what are the possible dynamic themes here in the position and what you should be looking for.
I agree with that. I think especially like positional puzzles I really struggle with, because positionally, like I have my ideas in the game. So if I am given a fresh puzzle, like I haven't come up with ideas yet, I haven't been thinking about it the whole game, etc. So there's that trade-off. You have ideas throughout the game that you're trying to get to work, but then tactics, there's a solution. So
right. So maybe it's worth spending more time on the positional puzzles. Actually, Agard's positional play is great, because well, it's full of these like strategic puzzles, positional play, but they're also very, very concrete. And you really have to like invest a lot of time in the position to analyze it and really like break it down. But well, great work today. Hopefully we can do this again. I actually really like this format where you can just solve puzzles OTB and everyone else can just discuss via the board. And yeah, just great training for everyone.
Yeah, thank you very much. That I know that you spent a lot of time on it, so thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm always happy to build to my collection of puzzles and exercises. So I always enjoy.
Where did you find that the one before this one? Was that in a
Actually,
book somewhere, or did you just find that game?
These are all from, I think, the Encyclopedia of Chess Combinations.
Oh, okay. I have that, but I haven't read it yet.
Yeah. I mean, there's like 3,000
Massive.
puzzles in there, so I think a ton of them are like totally unexplored. But yeah, I get a lot of my puzzles from there because they come from like real games and are generally very, very thematic.
Yeah, I've been considering like doing like one or two of those as like warm-ups in the morning. That's maybe something to do. It'll take 1,500 days then to finish. If there's 3,000, then I do 2 a day. But
Yeah. Actually, I think Aronian has famously gone through like a bunch of those books, like several of them, when he was younger. I'm sure a lot of the top players did, but I heard that specifically about him and in that book.
Yeah, I thought I heard that Kasparov went through the new one before one of his recent post-retirement tournaments.
Oh, interesting.
I thought I heard that. It could have been made up by whoever wrote it, but
yeah. Oh man, yeah. I'm sure these are a good warm up for Gary.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that's gonna do it. I'll be sending a raid here in just a sec. I think we're gonna raid chess coach Andres. So go tell him hello. And
tell him the coach that beat him says hi.
hopefully he's all right. There's a question about killer chess training. Yeah, that's Agard's training program. I've heard really good things about it, and a lot of people that I've talked to are fans. So if you're looking for like weekly training where you get to like do calculation work, and they have like lectures, I think, on all kinds of other topics as well. They basically just do a lot of like weekly group classes. I think it's definitely worth checking out their site.
I just signed up for it this morning, actually.
Oh, awesome. Wow.
I decided that if I'm going to really go for it, I really need to go for it. So
yeah, I think it's a great asset because you get to interact with others, you get feedback. We did a whole interview with Agard on the YouTube channel that you can find where I think he talks about the program a bit. But yeah, I mean, if you can afford it, I think it's a fantastic value. That's basically it. So
yeah, I decided that since I'm not going to be flying out to California, that I could get that instead. So.
Nice. All right. Well, alrighty, everybody. I will catch you all next time. At the very least, on Friday, we'll be doing another Dojo Talks and an Endgame Sensei back to back. But for now, check out Chess Coach Andres. He, I'm sure, will be streaming for a little while. And yeah, drop him a follow if you haven't already. Alrighty, I'll see ya.